So the lesson started off with a KWL, which is a thinking tool that a lot of teachers use to find out what students know, what they would like to know, and then to record what they've learned. So what it does is it maps out the whole learning journey. So that's how I started the lesson, because I wanted to model ways that students can engage students, not only emotionally, but also intellectually within the topic itself. So we used the information that was gathered from that, and I use that as the basis of my discussion around evolution. So the first column within a KWL, that's diagnostic testing, and it tells me the prior knowledge that the students have, but it also tells me about the misconceptions that they have. So then what I do is I use all of that information and I synthesize for the students the basic understanding of evolution that they will be required to not only teach evolution, but also to participate within this tutorial. So then we collected various data on the skull. We collated that as a group. And so this semester, I started last semester, but particularly more so this semester, I've been trialing the use of Google Drive to allow students to be able to collate and collaborate within cloud-based services. Each group was assigned a different skull. They took measurements of those skulls, and all of that was collated into a master spreadsheet. From their prior knowledge of human evolution, the groups were required to create a hypothesis which would then be tested against the data. So then individual groups went into a PowerPoint. Once again, it was a collaborative PowerPoint. Each group was assigned a slide, and so then on that slide they had to copy and paste their hypothesis, which they created as a group, and also the graph of their data, which tests that specific hypothesis. And then I wanted them to get up out of their seat and actually have a go at presenting, so then we did some presentations at the end. Group work is particularly valuable for a number of reasons. There's a common misconception out there that teaching as high school teaching is a very singular solo pursuit, when nothing could be further from the truth. So it's absolutely important that we actually embed that as a skill here at university, so they're able to function in those professional groups when they're out in teaching. I think there should be a balance between individual work and group work. Those are two important skills. One is not more important than the other, and both skills need to be developed, and I try and develop that in different ways. So while there is group work and there is movement, there is talk, what's more important is that the students are cognitively active, and that's what I try and encourage. A lot of the active learning that I have my students do is what we would call higher order thinking. Students are, for example, analysing. So by looking at a phenomenon, deconstructing it and looking at all the individual parts, or they're evaluating. So they're evaluating, say, the pros and cons of a particular teaching approach. And so one of the things I was trying to do today was encourage that metacognitive awareness of why the students would use particular techniques. So I would demonstrate a technique, and then I would step out of that teaching role, and then we'd talk about it as colleagues. So give me 2 reasons of why we would do a KWL. Give me 3 reasons of why we would do this. So they're aware at that meta level of why we do the various aspects. While the students actually had physical objects in front of them and they were using rulers, that was not really the active part. The active part was, for example, constructing their hypothesis, was putting in phylogenetic order, the order of hominid species. That's what makes learning active. The way that I teach, have students try and understand science, is that science is, yes, it is a body of knowledge, but that's only a consequence of science being an inquiry, a method of inquiry. Every single lab that I do with the senior science students, especially in biology, I always try and bring in some aspect of inquiry, whether it's actually data analysis. So we did a fair bit of data analysis today. I try and focus on a different element of inquiry through the various labs, so that over the suite of the labs, students have been exposed to all the different elements of scientific inquiry, especially experimental inquiry around hypothesis testing and things like that. I use a lot of mind maps, and I think a lot of my students would say I'm a big proponent of mind maps. The reason why I use mind maps is I'm such a strong visual thinker. I also use it as a diagnostic tool. So for example, if I get students to create a mind map and they have misconnected two nodes of information, it's quite easy for me to say, hey, maybe that's not so connected. If an out of field response comes or if an incorrect answer comes, because I know the general structure of how the information should be connected, I can actually park ideas off to the side. So that's a really good way I find of bringing information, but also helping people deal with those out of field responses or those incorrect responses that students come up with. One of the major frameworks that I use is the TPAC model. And so within this model, it says that to be an effective teacher, you need to be a triple threat. Using technology, not only modern technology, but also traditional technology, you have to know your pedagogy, which is how to teach, and you also need to know your content. So when you have the perfect marriage of technology, pedagogy, and content, that's what effective teaching is. So there was a part in today's lesson where I was using technology on 3 different levels. Before students launched into the skull investigation, I wanted to review their knowledge of skull anatomy. So I was standing at the front with a physical model, Artie, and I was actually pointing to the bones of the skull. I had a student on an iPad who was actually manipulating the iPad by zooming in, zooming out, and using the app. And so his job was to tell us whether we had the correct answer or not. The third thing that students were doing, I was asking them about various features of their skull, and they were pointing those features out on their own skull. So I was using a mixture of traditional technology in terms of the model, modern technology, but also the technology that the students have at their own disposal for their own learning.